Hello guys! Did you know that walrus sneeze can be deadly? There are reported cases of a walrus sneezing and cutting its own throat to death. Well, I made it up, just like I made up this new gambit that you can play against the Zukertort opening. Uh, well, there are already some gambits against this move. It is the Hairstrong gambit or the Rose gambit, and actually I was inspired by the Rose gambit where you get to play knight to c6, and if they capture, this is the walrus. And the walrus can be a little bit tricky, but it can be super tricky if you play it with some different move order and you start with knight to f6. Because in this position, the most common setup for white is to go for light square bishop fianchetto and getting short castled, in which case hanging your e-pawn can be pretty tricky. That's what I would like to showcase in this video. But let me just point out, if they choose some different pawn push like d4 or c4, it is not a good idea to push pawn to e5 in those variations. But since we played knight to f6, a super flexible move, you will be able to transpose to any other opening of your liking. But in today's video, let's just talk about pawn to g3. So now we are going to offer the e5 pawn, and if they capture this, well, this is the delayed walrus. And do you know what a delayed walrus have in common with a chess player? They both like mating. And I did not make that up. So in this case, we are going to continue in the walrus gambit style, and if they capture, we recapture with the d-pawn. Let me point out one thing: if they don't capture the knight, but push pawn to d4 or retreat the knight back, there is going to be a study with some traps in this line as well. Shout out to Monkey King, an international master who contributed to this study. Link will be in the description. Also, let me point out one more thing. Most guys aren't actually going to be grabbing this pawn, but playing bishop to g2 right away. Well, this is, if we turn on the stockfish, already better for black. We get to harass this knight, and after knight to d4, which is the most common line, we just push some more pawns and gain some nice space advantage in the opening. Yeah, but alright, now let's just talk about the real stuff and the really accepted line, which looks like this. So we reach this position where pretty much everybody is going to follow it up with bishop to g2. And now I like this quiet move, bishop to e6, because this doesn't make any threats, and most guys here are going to feel happy about just getting castled. And more than 70% of the players will castle here, thinking their king is safe. But actually, their king is right in the line of our attack, and we can start attacking with pawn to h5. And our threat is actually to just go ahead and push pawn to h4. So if, for example, they would just play some normal looking moves like d3 is the second most played one, we just push pawn to h4. And now we are putting this pressure on the king side, and our next steps are going to be creating this nice battery against this light square bishop, try to get rid of it, open up the king side, get castled long, and just go for an attack. Already slightly better position here for black. And for that reason, the only correct move here for white is to push pawn to h4 themselves. Now we are going to offer another pawn with pawn to g5, and there is no better option for them but to capture this. And in this position, we are going to play knight to g4. But there is another option, this crazy move, pawn to h4 and just hang the knight completely. Well, this is not even the walrus. This is the walnuts gambit. Anyways, this can be potentially pretty tricky for white to handle, as we are down 2 pawns and a knight, and the evaluation is just 1 point something. Let me know if you would be interested in me analyzing this line as well. But in today's video, we are going to look at the more solid approach with knight to g4. So we are planting a really annoying knight in white's territory, and it is hard to get rid of. So in this position, once again, the only correct move for white is to push pawn to d4. The reason is, for once, they want to protect this pawn as it is being hit, and they don't want to allow us capture it. And second of all, they want to get rid of the ideas of bishop to c5 at some point. Let me just show you. If they play, for example, some random knight to c3, we are going to capture this pawn. Yes, they can push the d pawn and harass our queen, but our queen is going to be hanging around this file where the king is. We are going to in the future push pawn to h4, try to open up some files and lines and diagonals against this king. We will be able to get cast long and just have a huge attack. As you can see, this is almost winning for black. And if for some reason they push like these two guys did, that reach this position, pawn to d3, which does cover the pawn on g5, but it doesn't stop bishop to c5 in the future. So to showcase this line, for example, we would continue with pawn to h4. Now this guy rated more than 2200 tried to get rid of the knight with bishop to f3 and found himself in a losing position very quickly, because we are going to open up the file of our rook. And here he did a pretty bad blunder with capturing on g3 and allowing bishop to c5 with the tempo on the king. He blocked this, but after knight captures, bishop captures, and bishop recaptures, he is pretty much lost. King to g2 was played, and it is a checkmate in 7 moves with bishop to h3 check. Alright, so the only correct move, once again, as I mentioned, is to push pawn to d4. Here we can continue with pawn to h4, and now they should try to get rid of the knight. There are no games in the database in this position so far, so it's hard to say what would be white players doing most of the time, but let me just tell you, if they decide to capture this pawn, that's a pretty bad idea for them. If they just develop something, they allow us to capture here, which is not great for them. So they really should be trying to get rid of this knight. And actually our knight is trapped, and it cannot go to any of these squares. So we are losing this knight, but don't worry. We have a little trick that I would personally try to go for, and it is to move knight to h6. Because, well, they would like to capture the trapped knight, right? But if they do capture, now they find themselves in a lost position. We are going to capture on g3, and our big threat is to bring our queen to h4. So for example, if they just play knight to c3, we are going here, and this is minus 10 something, minus 11. Yeah, dead lost for them. So they should really bring their queen to d3, but we still play queen to h4. And now they have to move the rook, otherwise we will just checkmate them in one move. And now we get to play a long castle, and yeah, this is just still a winning attack for us. They have to play this weird pawn to h7 move or something. Yeah, let's go back. So after pawn to h4 and they find the correct move of harassing our knight, there is also another solution, which is the engine recommendation to push the pawn to h3, hitting their bishop. So they need to park it in the corner. And now our pawn makes it to h2 with a tempo on the king. So their king is forced to g2. And now we can play knight to e5. And now after they capture the knight, we are going to deliver this bishop to h3 check, forcing the king to f2, and follow it up with another check with bishop to c5. Now they have to block this check, and we can capture on g5. And in this position, I believe most guys would mess it up, because their rook is hanging, and people are materialistic. They would like to protect their material. And as you can see, the best move is just to develop the knight to c3. But if they would play like rook to e1, now we are winning once again. And the reason is we get to pile our pressure on the g file. So threatening this nasty check, they would have to push the pawn. Now we throw in this in-between move, kind of, with rook to d8, hitting the queen. They cannot simply just move the queen out of the way, because this is a checkmate in one. So they have to block this attack with something, either knight or bishop. I say the bishop is more natural, but it doesn't matter. They are lost anyways. We are going to hit them with this check. King is forced to e2, and now we sacrifice our rook. If they capture, we will just win the queen like this with a forced checkmate actually. Alright guys, so please, you be the judge of this opening. Do you think it is tricky enough to be played, at least in Blitz or Bullet? And which trap would you go for? This engine line where they are supposed to hang their rook, like this? Or would you prefer to go for this knight to h6 trap? Let me know in the comments what you think about this opening. Thanks for watching. Have a nice life and bye.